Welcome to the Barrowcast. My name is Kanare Mugume and welcome you back from all the holidays. And today on the show, we'll be looking at a very crucial topic that has, of course, caught the eyes of the many, the Trump presidency. The way I can introduce this episode is by saying drill, baby, drill. So, we'll look at the Trump's presidency and the impact of this presidency on Africa's extractive industries. And today on the show, I'm glad to be hosting Denis Kusasira. Good to have you on the podcast.
Good to have me here, and I'm happy to be here to discuss this critical topic with you, Canary.
Denis is a senior partner at Abmac Associates. He's also the head of the mining practice at Abmac, a Ugandan law firm specializing in corporate and commercial aspects of mining, oil and gas, power, electricity, infrastructure development, tax law in the entire East Africa. He holds a Master's of Law in Mineral Law and Policy from the University of Dundee and has extensive experience on procurement, negotiation, and drafting of contract documentation in the natural resources sector. There's nothing that you talk about here in Uganda in the natural resources or oil and gas, and you not see his name. So good to have you on the show. Let's talk about this Trump presidency. First of all, I would like to pick your mind. Were you for Trump or are you for Kamala Harris? Let's begin on a lighter note.
I didn't have a particular candidate I was supporting, but I was following them. And I think both of them have got something to offer, but I was more for the Democrats.
I see.
Yes.
US policy shifts under Trump. Let's examine America First agenda and its ramifications for the US-Africa relations, especially on the extractive sector. When they say American First, does this scare you as someone who is, of course, involved in the extractive sector?
Yeah, America First policy that has been rolled out by President Trump, I think has majorly three policy directions or directives. The first is keep the jobs within America. US is going to focus more on projects within the United States to create more jobs for its people. The second one is the US is going to keenly look at international agreements that impact on the US economic interests, particularly if agreements are going to impede the development of US natural resources and therefore affect the capacity to create jobs inside the US. Those agreements perhaps won't be concluded, at least by the US, or they will have serious reservations on them. And then related to that, the US seeks to pull out of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is an agreement that is signed under the United Nations Framework on Climate Change to keep global warming below 20 degrees Celsius. And United States seeks to roll out of that. And that has an impact, of course, on the natural resources and extractive industry because, we have got critical minerals related to climate change, clean energy transition, and then we have got fossil fuels, oil and gas, coal, natural gas, although natural gas is considered green or blue. Pulling out of the Paris Agreement means that the US will roll out massive drilling programs inside the US, and also means probably that US would support
Every country
that is developing its resources, even if they are fossil. But
does this mean that as Uganda, because we're looking at our first oil, does this mean that we should embrace the Trump presidency, his policy, with two hands?
No, we have to be careful because, Trump has got 4 years.
Anything can happen after the fall.
And natural resources projects, by their nature, have a long gestation period between from inception to fruition, production. They take long. Look at the projects in Uganda. Your first oil was discovered in 2006. Of course, Uganda is exceptional. It's been inordinate delay and too much back and forth on things that I think don't really matter beyond getting the oil out of the ground. But these projects, they certainly can't be developed in 4 years. So Trump's presidency is 4 years, and you have got Europe, which still believes in the Paris Agreement. You have got companies like Total that we have here that have not, scaled back on their net zero commitments, and they are in your country. So they are not going necessarily to be swayed by what Trump has said, because they also have got their countries that still back the Paris Agreement, and also they have got institutional investors that don't want to see more production of fossil fuels. So embracing Trump's policies, we have to be careful, because much as he has done what he has done, he's still telling you that it's going to be America first. So most of the investment is going to be inside America.
Centered around America. And Trump has also promised to cut energy costs, especially within America, in half within a year. And he claimed removing all restraints on drilling for liquid gold that will be able to achieve this. Even though US is already producing more oil and gas than any other country in history, we want to know from your perspective that you see, once this is approved and America goes back to 100% drilling, do you see the cost of oil going down, not just within America, but worldwide?
Not in the short term. Not in the short term, because up until now, America has been increasing its export, even under Biden administration. I think America now exports, it produces about 13 million barrels a day or something of crude oil. And it's been exporting. It increased its export to Europe. It's been trying to work around increasing its export of natural gas to Europe, trying to fill the gap that has been created by the sanctions on Russia. There is not going to be, I think, in the short run, such an impact on the prices of crude oil or natural gas, because, as I've told you, natural resources projects have a long gestation period. So even if you started to drill today, it's not likely that you're going to take these projects to production in less than 4 years. But also remember that putting policies out there is one, and also investors actually doing the investment is another thing.
That's right.
So you may have the policy in place, but the investors will have to evaluate their options, whether they're going to jump quickly onto the Trump policy without minding what could happen to them after Trump is out of power, as it will be after 4 years.
What about the climate treaties, wind energy and electric vehicles, the shift that the world is turning towards too? Even as for all our projects, ECOP, everything that we're doing, and the oil and gas, we are making sure that there's an energy transition regardless, even though with the president's argument, it should happen in a particular way that allows us to benefit from our natural resources. With Trump's policies, do you think that there's going to be pulling of the rope? Europe is shifted towards ensuring that the world transits in terms of energy. With the COP agreements that are already signed almost every year, and now America withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, where does this leave us as a country or as a continent?
As a continent, we've been on our own energy transition journey, which is not in sync with what we see in Europe. Look at electric vehicles. How many electric vehicles do you have on the African continent, particularly in Uganda here, compared to what you see in the Nordic countries, what you see in Paris, what you see in China? China is the leading user of electric vehicles and probably the winner in the energy transition debate because they control the bulk of resources, all the technology for processing minerals that are critical for energy transition. Africa is going to remain where it has been. It has that skepticism of what should happen to us. We have our resources which we haven't exploited, and we've not been the largest polluters. I think we have a very, very minimal contribution to emissions, and we have our resources still under the ground.
Yeah.
There has always been tension, even before Trump. There's always been tension between Africa and Europe and the proponents of climate change, energy transition. We are going to remain in that mode. Trump rolling out of Paris Agreement is not, first of all, immediate. It has to take, I think, 1 year under the agreement before it is
about
effective.
2 years.
One or 2 years before it is effective.
And that's almost half of his
So
term.
half of his term. And after that, who knows? I mean, investors in the natural resources take a long-term view of things. They're not short-termists. I do not think that there is going to be such a significant effect, by the way, of Trump's policy on energy transition.
They could be, if you look at it this way, cutting of funding. You know, every year we go to COP, we advocate for climate financing. Don't you think that by cutting of this money, it's going to hugely impact on the kind of work we need to do in that regard?
We already have not had funding as developing countries. The developed countries have not. They have defaulted on their funding obligations.
Okay, so we'll be as good as we are.
As good as we are. There has been minimal funding coming from the US and these other net polluters. If you look at the commitments that were made way back at COP and the money that has been put in that fund for helping developing countries is so minimal, I don't think cutting aid by America alone is going to make such a big difference, in my view.
The influence of US on Africa and US relationship with Africa. Trump looks to be the president that is transactional. It either works result oriented as opposed to the old bureaucratic systems of the US, which, you know, pass a resolution, it has to go through this way, and then juxtapose that on the other big powers that want the attention of Africa, including China, Russia, and now the Middle East. Don't you think it will be advantageous for the continent to see that Africa, the US will be competing, will create competition for Africa between themselves and the other big powers? Wouldn't that work for the extractives industry?
Yeah, it will. The competition has always been there, most especially for critical minerals, because critical minerals, of course, criticality of a mineral depends on the abundance or lack thereof in a given country. But we know for energy transition, which must happen, by the way, with or without Trump, in America or outside America, it will have to happen. The critical minerals such as copper, such as cobalt, such as lithium, graphite, manganese, bulk of them are found either in China or Africa. Particularly cobalt is majorly Africa. I think Africa hosts the largest deposit of cobalt in the DRC. And manganese in Ghana. These are needed, and China has been moving ahead of the US, and the US is playing a catch-up game. The US is not going to abandon, Africa simply because either they don't believe in Trump's policy or they do. The demand for critical minerals that US does not have, like rare earth elements, will still keep US around, regardless of what Africa thinks about Trump's policy, in my view.
When we go to Uganda's extractive sector, have we ever sat down, putting Trump aside, have we ever sat down to know our worth as a country? Do you think that we also suffer from that, knowing how there's been slow progress, especially in the mining sector? The slow progress is brought about by the fact that we don't even know how much worth is beneath the earth that we sit on as a country?
Yeah, I think Uganda, the biggest problem we have is we are running ahead of ourselves all the time. We started very well, though late, in 2000. You know, the mineral sector lagged behind, in Africa particularly, lagged behind from 1960s, when African continents were getting their independence. Thereafter, there was a lot of nationalization of mining projects. And that scared investors, and they stopped investing in the African mining sector. So we have been lagging behind in attracting exploration capital. And somehow there was a reform. There was a movement for reform, of legal reform on the African continent between 1990 to 1997, 98. And most countries took advantage of that. I think the typical one that I can point out for you is Tanzania. Tanzania started their reform in 1992. By 1997, they were ready, and that was right at the peak of the mineral boom. And they got a lot of investment. You've seen big companies operating in Tanzania, companies such as Barrick operating in Tanzania, companies such as Ashanti Gold operating in Tanzania, where Tanzania was way behind us in production of gold back in the day. But for us, we came on the scene in 2000. We rolled out our policy in 2000, enacted the Mining Act in 2003, operationalized it in 2004, and we had a surge of investment, coming in, an increase in investment coming into the country between 2004 to 2009. A lot of companies applying for exploration license. Then we had our aeromagnetic survey to simply kind of map areas where there is prospectivity. That is a very basic step in mineral development. You use magnetic surveys to look into to try and understand what rocks you have, and what they could probably host. And after that, you interpret the data and have what we call targets that you can drill and find whether there is commercially viable resources or not.
And now, it's really targets that would attract the strategic
those are now targets. You have to attract exploration companies to come and do more work on them. Now, before we could do that, we then jumped onto the value addition debate, which is a good debate. But is it the time to talk about value addition? Because you do not have knowledge of what you have. You don't know how much gold you have because you have not done enough exploration. You have got iron ore that you can see on the ground, but you don't know how much is it, how deep, how large. You have a bit of understanding of its grades, but you don't know whether they're uniformly, distributed across the entire deposit.
What is stopping us from doing that? Because how can we boast of having many minerals underneath, and then we are not a mineral-rich destination? We are endowed with occurrences, particularly every mineral that you might name.
I think that's where the problem starts, where you say we are endowed when you have not done exploration.
How do we know?
You can say we have good prospectivity. Given what we've seen in the aeromagnetic survey results, there is prospectivity, and the prospectivity is there, is no doubt, because when you look at our neighbors, Tanzania, there's booming mining industry. DRC industry is booming, even if there is even political instability. In Kenya, parts in Kakamega, there's a lot of gold mining. I don't want to talk about Rwanda. I'm not so sure about where they get their minerals from. But look, it's not believable that the colonial masters, when they were demarcating the boundaries, they just singled out Uganda and put it where the minerals are not. But they are in Congo, they are in Sudan, they are in Tanzania. What we haven't done is to move to that step, attract the good exploration companies, and give them time to do their work and be able to tell us what we have. So we've rolled out policies that are anti-exploration investment.
Right. So you've brought in the value addition debate, and I want to ask this question. Would you rather we concentrate on exploration of like two minerals, maybe copper and cobalt. We just focus on that. We do thorough exploration, attract investment in exploration, or would you rather we focus on maybe 10 minerals and do value addition? Where would we get the most money from?
I think we have to first of all look at the history of our mining sector. What were we mining before? What was Uganda mining before? It was the first mine that was opened here was a tin mine in 1925 in Ntungamo, Merasando tin. The second one was copper, Kilembe mines. The third one was Nyamuriro mine, tungsten. Those are three. That you can talk about minerals that can be traded on the international market. Copper, cobalt as well. There's a lot of cobalt in Chilembe. And tin, tungsten. But also you have got what we call industrial minerals that can be traded on the international market, like phosphates, vermiculite, if you've heard of vermiculite. It's in the eastern part of the country, in a district called Manafa. These if well, if we focus on those and be able to open a large-scale mine, it will have a knock-on effect and first of all demonstrate that we can sustain a project in Uganda, we can support a mining project in Uganda. But when these companies are starting to, explore, find out whether they can make money, and then you begin to impose very, very stringent stringent conditions for their operations, then they just push back on putting in further investments. For example, I can tell you that yes, we want to do our value addition. We want to manufacture our steel bars here.
Yeah.
But where is our iron ore located? It is in Kabale, at least the one that I know that is viable. The one in Tororo, I've been involved in that project. I know that it has got its issues. It has got a lot of phosphorus in it. The technology is not yet enabling us to process steel from it. So we have what you can talk about is in Kabale. What is the distance between Kabale and Kampala? Where there is...
It's a whole day of travel.
You have to... It means you have to put your steel mill in Kabale. You have to process your iron ore there, make your steel bar, and transport it to the market. That is Kampala. What's the distance between Kabale and Kampala versus Mombasa, Kampala? And you have also other inputs that you probably don't have. I can tell you that for iron ore, for steel making, for every ton of iron ore, you need a third ton of coal, coking coal, which you don't have in the country. You need electricity. Do you have enough electricity in Kabale? Probably you can't say it's not possible, but before you can conclude that it's possible to add value to that iron ore and make the steel bar cheaply to compete with what is imported, you need first of all to understand what it takes to develop those projects. And exploration means you are doing exploration, you are evaluating how big this resource is. Is it commercially viable? What does it take to produce it? What does it take to process it? How much power? How much other inputs like coal, limestone that you need? Where are you going to get them from? Are you going to import them? How do you transport coal from, say, China or India to Kabale? Does it make economic sense to transport heavy, coal on that road, take it to Kabale, make an iron bar, transport the iron bar from... So it means there's a lot you have to look at apart from just having one mineral alone. You need to look at so many things.
And I'm going to ask lastly on the leadership. But first, last year, government announced that it had completed a redevelopment process for Kilembe mines. And the public call for 14 bids, for bids for 14 companies, after thorough review, they chose one and went into a mineral production sharing agreement. government partly owns this, the Ministry of Finance at least. Is this towards the right direction, the redevelopment of the mines? But also, most importantly, we know that the Kilembe mines has now been completed. We expected that perhaps by this year would be somewhere, or at least they could give us prospects that by the end of this year, 2025. I know it should be long term for natural minerals, but even with all this, where is the gap? Are we not prioritizing financing for example, the money that should be going into making this work? Are we just not having the right leadership in the sector? Or the problem is possibly in we're just a poor country with just huge ambitions?
No, the leadership is not a big issue. I think it's the focus, the lack of focus. The lack of focus. I don't know who has been selected as the winner of Kilembe. Kilembe is a very problematic mine. It's an old mine. You know, it's harder to run these old to start these old mines than a new one, because you have a lot of legacy issues, environment. You have got land issues, but I don't know. I don't know what government plan is when you talk about a production sharing agreement. I even fear more, because production sharing agreements don't necessarily work in the mining sector. They are for the oil and gas. At least that's what is known. I've not seen a country that has successfully implemented a production sharing agreement in the mining sector. You know, in the minerals industry, you have got the solid minerals and the oil and gas. In the oil and gas, the production sharing agreement works well. It's tested. In the mining sector, I know a few countries that tried it and it failed. And I don't think you are going to have it succeed in a frontier jurisdiction like Uganda, where we are struggling to attract investment. Now you are talking about production sharing, which is alien to the mining sector, and investors detest that kind of arrangement. So I don't know. Maybe you can have a production sharing agreement, but then what are you going to do to other taxes? Are they still going to pay the 30% corporate tax? Are they still going to pay the royalties? And by the way, you government, when you share in the production, where are you taking the mineral? Are you going to sell it outside now? Are you going
the company that will be managing the state's commercial interests is now the Uganda National Mining Company,
which is new, has never done any business.
Has
But
never done
where
any
is
business
it taking the mineral? Where, after picking the copper
isn't
Kilembe?
it its task to promote, sustain, and also make sure it takes care of the national
Yeah,
interests?
but
of
after
commercial?
getting the copper from Kilembe mines, where is it going to take it? And at the same time, you're talking about value addition. So if you want to add value to your minerals, I would imagine that the copper from Kilembe, you want it to be refined. So what do you want to? Why do you want to take away some of the copper that would have gone to the refinery? Why do you want to take away the copper? So do you need the production share there? I thought you should all focus your energy, get enough feedstock into the midstream facility and produce what we want. Is blister copper or 99.99%, and then maybe are you going to say share in the final product that is being produced? And then after what? I am sorry, I've not seen the terms, first of all, the production sharing agreement, so which is unfortunate, because in this era of transparency, by now we would be having a draft of that agreement. And I think if I read the Mining Act very well, they are supposed to be a model of that agreement tabled before Parliament, so that we can comment on it and see whether it can support investment. Without it, I cannot really conclude whether we are yet to see production start in Kilembe. I still see a regime that is very difficult to use and attract investment in the mining sector.
Right.
So that doesn't give me much hope. And also, I don't know which company. Kilembe is a very old mine. It requires a seasoned mining company that understands. And also, because it's a small deposit in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to get very huge companies, but you need a very good junior mining company. In the oil and gas, if I can give you an example, a Tullow of some sort, as opposed to Total or Sinnock, a company that can run on a very small budget, but knows what they are doing. But if you hand it to a company which has never done a mining project, I'm worried. If you hand it to what they did before, I think before they handed it to a Chinese entity whose pedigree in the mining sector was unknown, but when I read more about them, I knew that I found that they were involved in battery manufacturing. Manufacturing and mining are totally different things. You can be involved in manufacturing batteries, but do you know how to mine? Do you know how to do exploration? Do you know how to process these minerals? So I'm eager to see who has been awarded this concession.
Denis, thank you so much for appearing here on the Barrowcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Welcome to this segment called Energy Insider. And the insider here being Ronnie Bravo Katunji. Welcome to the Barrowcast.
Thank you very much, Canary.
It'll be exciting to have you every week to give us inside information on what's happening on the inside.
The countries with the highest economies also have the highest consumption of energy. And literally by how much energy you consume, it can tell us how prosperous you are. It can tell us whether people go to school or not. It can tell us whether people have hospitals or not, just by looking at your energy profile. So energy is a very pertinent part in any society.
If you're to have a bad view on the region from the top, where are we as a country?
So the landscape of our energy sector in perspective of the world, we are still considered very much in the energy poor category. And even on an African scale, we are still considered as very low on the hierarchy of countries in terms of our energy consumption per capita. But zooming back into the country, there has been a lot of progress in our energy sector. You know, our just the electricity production capacity over the last 10 years have more than doubled. And there is a lot of projects in the energy sector. We have recently added, I don't know if they've commissioned the plant yet, but it's going to increase our energy production capacity by 600 megawatts. So there's a lot happening in the energy space. We know that Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited is taking over from Umeme. So we're going to be running our electricity sector as a nation. So that is in electricity. Then a lot of stuff is happening within the oil and gas sector. Literally, since the FID, which is the final investment decision to invest in the flagship projects in the oil and gas sector, took place about 2 years ago, we have seen a transformation of the landscape in Bulisa, in Chikube district. When you see what's on ground vis-a-vis what was there 3 years ago, it is a lot of stuff that is happening. We have a new airport in a space of 3 years. We have a new international airport that is almost fully functional now. So there's a lot happening within the oil and gas sector. We are hoping to start producing the oil. All this is happening before production starts. So we are hoping to start producing maybe next year or this year. So there's a lot happening in the oil and gas space. There's a lot happening in the minerals sector. We are upgrading our mineral laws. And right now, I think the biggest talk in terms of the minerals, there is the revamp of the Kilembe mines. We have secured, from what I understand, a new investor into that sector. That has not yet been clear, but according to official communication, there is an investor.
I thought transparency is part of the
there is, I guess,
way things are supposed to be done.
Transparency,
especially in this sector that seems to be a little more sensitive than any other sector.
I agree, and I feel like we are finding our feet with the transparency as a nation. You know, traditionally how things have been working, it has not been it has just been government running things and really us not being in the know. But there is a lot that is being done to try and increase the transparency, and I think we'll get there.
Right. Yeah. And future prospects, when you look at Uganda in 10 years, I think we're revamping the laws. Yeah. We've also now gotten government to do business We have companies managing commercial interests for government, both in the minerals and now in oil and gas. When you look at Uganda in 10, 15, 20 years, do you see it as a major player on the continent in the extractives?
If we consider what's been happening and if it stays consistent in some sectors, especially the oil and gas sector, we have structured the oil and gas sector in a way that it is sustainable. So we have an an oil company that is going to be looking after the interests of the state in terms of the business interests. We have a very strong regulator, which is the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, that is making sure that things are being done properly. And we have serious players in the upstream like Total Energies, like Sinok, that have signed contracts that they're going to be here for the next 25 years. So if we continue on that trend, I can see us producing oil, that we're definitely going to become producers very soon. It's no longer a question of if, it's a question of when. And the eco pipeline is being built. So there is going to be, and that is going to be the longest heated pipeline in the world. And so you can see we're already we're already setting paths in terms of doing projects on a mega scale. And I think if we continue in that line, we will definitely be big players in the region.
What would a big player look like? What would define that?
I think as energy goes, we would want to have Ugandans being able to, first of all, have access to electricity. You know that not every Ugandan has access to electricity. In fact, the percentages are quite low in terms of people that have access. So that would look like, what would be good, or what would be where I would aim to be, is to have every Ugandan have access to electricity. What does that do? It means people can be able to have fridges where they can keep their food for longer, rather than, if you don't eat it today, tomorrow you don't have it. We can have businesses across the country that are taking advantage of having access to electricity. So that would be,
and of course, access to information and internet.
Yes, exactly. So you cannot have access to internet if you don't have electricity. You cannot have access to a lot of things. So that is a very high KPI that will be that we are doing well. We have Ugandans having access to, and then the other one is we have to see tangible results in terms of people benefiting from the oil and gas sector, people benefiting in terms of the people, let's say, where the projects are right now in Bulisa compared to where they were before. We need to see that there is a transformation in that area. People are getting out of that of poverty, and they're getting into, the children are getting into schools, the hospitals being built. So those.
So what you're majorly seeing is, and I like the fact that you're not seeing this on a grand scheme of things. Uganda boasting of its sector in the region, on the continent, but all this money trickling down to the people, it's intended to benefit first.
Absolutely. I mean, it will come down to that. Like, as a Ugandan,
that eventually we all share the benefits.
As a Ugandan, I want to benefit from the extractive sector. I want to benefit from the energy sector. So if I am known on the global scale, but it's not trickling down to,
doesn't make sense
to the normal person, it doesn't make sense.
Talking about benefiting Ugandans, you've been very vocal and consistent in refuting the numbers when it comes to local content. Where is the gap? Maybe you could first give an explanation why you refute the numbers according to what government is giving, and then you tell us where is the gap. Is it about how the numbers are calculated? Is it about how the laws are structured in terms of local content? What is it?
I think I've not been necessarily refuting them, but I've been saying that they are not necessarily representative of that trickle down of the oil and gas sector in terms of the benefit to the local people. So the latest published figure puts it around 25,000 Ugandans have gotten jobs within the oil and gas sector. And there is a percentage, which is about 90% of those that have gotten jobs in the oil and gas sector are Ugandans, meaning the other 10% are foreign nationals. So there is a gap there that needs to be filled, because we want to know the 90% that have gotten
What are they doing?
the opportunities in the oil and gas sector, where are they, and how much are they earning?
Yeah.
Compared to, let's say, the 10%.
What should matter? How much they earn, or the number? It's like quantity versus quality. Like UPE, like you send all kids to school regardless of the quality of the education,
Yeah.
but you'll boast of millions of kids in UPE. So what should matter in terms of local content? Should it be about how much they earn? What levels of administration or leadership are they? Or it should be about how many, that even me, if I'm able to, sell eggs from my chicken farm, I should be able to be counted even if I'm selling 2 trays.
So the whole concept of local content is about value retention. Okay, so of the value that is being generated by the oil and gas sector, how much are we retaining as a country? Yeah, so if you have 20,000 people that are retaining only 1% of the value, it does not make sense. Okay,
Right.
so that's why I'm like, we would like an indicator that helps us to know how much value we are retaining, and that would come down to getting some figures in terms of how many people are now, how many of those people are in senior management jobs, how many of those are in technical jobs, and how many of those are just doing the casual laborer jobs. And then what are we doing to increase the uptake of the people that are in the casual labor category, to to go up the category so they can get a little bit more money? Because
But are you also saying that there should be no casual labor? Because at the end of the day, it's all required.
casual labor is important. Actually, that's where the majority of the people are employed. Okay, because it's a construction site, there's a lot of things moving. You don't need to have skill to move a brick from A to B. Although you need the basic health and safety training. But the idea of local content is, as I said, value retention. How much, if the contract is issued to a company A, and that contract is valued at $300 million, how much of that $300 million is retained locally as a country? Yeah.
What do you see 2025 having for the extractive sector or oil and gas?
So 2025, I see a lot more in the oil and gas sector. I see a lot of activity. So the activity in ECOP is probably going to peak in 2025. By that I mean the pipeline is being constructed, and construction is when when many people are doing hands-on. So we're going to see a lot of more people being recruited by the pipeline company. We're going to see a lot more companies getting work along the pipeline route, because this pipeline is I think 1,440 kilometers all the way from Kabale in Hoima to Tanzania. So it's a very long pipeline, and people along that route, there's going to be a lot of activity happening. Total is also ramping up its activity in the Tilenga oil field, because they needed to be ready such that when the pipeline is ready, the oil can flow. So there's going to be a lot more activity in terms of, and majorly on the what they call the central processing facilities. That is the heart of most of these projects in Tilenga and Kingfisher. So that there's going to be a lot of activity there to try and get it finished, because it needs to be ready for oil to flow. So in the oil and gas sector, that's what I see. I see in 2025 the Kilembe mines picture becoming more and more transparent, like you're saying. Like
We hope so.
Yes.
Because up to now, there's not many details on the.
We have not seen a lot of official
on the
communication.
agreement.
So
There's
we'd
no
want to
official
know.
agreement. In October 2024, the conversation, at least official communication from the Minister of Energy, Ruth Nankabira, was that out of the bid that attracted 14 companies, we had one company chosen. And there was no official communication of what this company is, its background. We hope, like you're optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. So we hope we're going to see that. Then there is
The
a lot
transparency.
of things happening within the gold sector as well. And there is now around 11 refineries in the country that are refining gold, and there is a lot of activities in Karamoja to do with mining, but we want to see how that value chain is going to unfold with the new company, with the new mining company, the national mining company. So we're hoping to see a lot of activity in that sector as well.
All right, and maybe also in the we also hope to see some activity in the new discoveries in Busoga sub-region.
Yes, and we're also looking forward to see what does it look like when new EDCL takes over
After
and we no
Umeme.
longer have Umeme. I think you saw what was happening on Twitter. I think there was some issues with people could not load their car.
Yeah.
And so they were like, is it Umeme that is sabotaging as they leave? So
Yeah.
as UEDCL, I think they're supposed to take full control in March. So
And make a difference. Not
yes,
just take
so we're
control.
going to see what that means.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That has been the Energy Insider.